Good morning, students. Today I am going to teach you the third chapter of your supplementary reader book, and the name of the chapter is The Selfish Giant. Students, before starting this chapter, I want to tell you a brief summary of this chapter. Dear students, there was a selfish giant who had a lovely garden where children loved to play. But the giant was so selfish that he built a high wall all around his garden, and due to fear, the children left to play in the garden of the giant. After some time, the giant felt that there was winter, there was only winter in his garden, means neither summer nor spring came in his garden. He became very worried because everywhere there was spring and summer, but only in his garden it was only winter there. After some time, he saw a change in his garden. When he looked from his window, then he found that through a hole the children entered his garden and they were playing. The trees were very happy and they were laden with fruits and flowers. In the corner of the garden there was a tree who had not any flowers. There was still winter in that corner because there was a little child and he was standing there. He was unable to climb the tree. The giant quietly went there and he put the child in the branches of the tree, and at once the tree in the corner also bloomed. After that, the time passed away and the giant became very old. Now he did not play with the children. Sitting in his armchair, he saw the children playing and he was feeling very happy. But he was missing the little child because from that day onward, he could not see the little child. One day, the giant was in his house and he felt something in his garden. When he went into his garden, he could not believe on his eyes because he saw that the little boy whom he had helped earlier was standing there, but the little boy was wounded. The giant became very angry and asked that who dared to hurt that little child. The little child smiled and said that once he had allowed him to play in his garden, so now it was the time to go the giant with the little child, and both of them went to the paradise. When the children came to play in the garden, they found that the giant was lying dead and his dead body was covered with white flowers. Okay, now open your book and see at page number 17. I will explain the chapter. Every afternoon as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. Every afternoon when the children came from their school, they used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The garden was very lovely, and it had soft green grass, and the beautiful flowers were standing over the grass, and it looked like the stars. And there were 12 peach, a sweet fruit trees, and all those trees broke out into delicate buds of pink and pearl colors in springtime, and in the autumn all those trees bore rich fruit. The birds sitting on the trees sang sweetly, and when the birds sang at that time, the children stopped playing and they listened the twittering sound of the birds, and they said that they were very happy there. One day the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend the Cornish hog and had stayed with him for 7 years. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. One day the selfish giant came back. He had gone to his friend's Cornish hog, and he had stayed there for 7 years with his friend. When he came, he saw the children were playing in his garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. When he saw that the children were playing there, he saw in a very rough voice. He became very angry, and he cried in a very rough voice that, "What are you doing here? Who told you to enter the garden?" "My own garden is my own," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." He said that it was his garden only, and no one could enter the garden. He did not allow anybody to play in his garden except himself, and that's why he built a high wall all around the garden and put a notice board. What was the notice board? "Trespassers will be prosecuted." Means the person who will enter without his permission, he will be punished. The children who enter the garden without the permission of the giant, he will be punished, because he was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander around the high wall when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Now, the children had no place for playing, to play them. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and stony. That's why they did not like the road, and whenever they came near the garden, they used to talk that they were very happy when they were allowed to play in the garden. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The spring season came everywhere, all over the country. There were little buds and little birds, little flowers in the garden everywhere, but only in the garden of the giant there was still winter. The birds did not come there, and the trees forgot to bloom. Once a beautiful flower put its heads out from the grass, But when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. Once a beautiful flower bloomed, but when the flower saw the notice board that the children who will enter without the permission of the giant will be punished, then it slipped back and went to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. Spring has forgotten this garden, they cried, so we'll live here all the year round. The snow and the frost were very happy because they thought that the spring had forgotten to come in the garden. That's why they were very happy. The snow covered the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. The snow covered all the grass with his white cloth, and the frost covered with white color to all the trees. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he rode all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots. After that, they invited the north wind, and the north wind came, and it broke the chimney pots. This is a delightful spot, he said. We must ask hell on a visit. So the hell came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slats, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could. He was dressed in grey and his breath was like ice. After that they invited the hell, and the hell also agreed to come in the garden of the giant. And every day for 3 hours the hell gave sharp sound on the roof, and mostly castles were broken down, and mostly slates of the castles were broken down. And then he moved round and round the garden as he could do. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. I hope there will be a change in the weather. Sitting at the window, when the giant looked out at his garden, he said to himself that he was unable to understand that why the spring had not come in his garden. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but the giant's garden she gave none. He is too selfish, she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. But the spring did not come in the garden of the giant, and nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden throughout the country, but in the garden of the giant there were no fruit and no flowers. It was always winter there, and the north wind, the hail, the frost, and the snow danced through the trees. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. Once morning, the giant was lying and he listened some lovely music, and he thought that it was the voice, it was the sound of the king's musicians. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he had heard a bird singing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. The giant had not listened any bird singing, so he thought that it was the most beautiful music in the world, but the sound was of a little linnet bird. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaming, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. After that, the hare stopped dancing in the garden, and the north-west stopped rolling, and a delicious fragrance came to him through the open window. I believe the spring has come at last, said the giant, and he jumped out of the bed and looked. When he felt a delicious fragrance, then he said to himself that he believed that the spring has come in his garden, and being happy, he jumped out of his bed and looked out through his window. Dear students, the part first of this chapter is completed. Just listen the lecture very carefully and revise it.